Picture this. You wake up, reach for your laptop, flip it open, and instead of the old, slightly clunky Linux desktop you remember from years ago, you're greeted by something that looks polished, fluid, and strangely futuristic. Windows glide like liquid. Apps launch instantly. Your hardware just works. No hunting for drivers. No terminal gymnastics. No mysterious black screens. If someone walked into the room and saw it, they wouldn't say, "Oh, you're running Linux." They'd ask, "Wait, what system is that? It looks incredible." And that's the question we're exploring today. Linux desktop in 2026 is almost unrecognizable compared to what it used to be. So, did we finally win? Let's rewind for a second. For decades, Linux on the desktop was the underdog story. Powerful, flexible, beloved by developers and tinkerers, but always just slightly out of reach for regular users. You'd hear the same jokes over and over. Linux is great. If you like editing config files, works perfectly except for Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, printers, and your GPU. Year of the Linux desktop. Maybe next year. We laughed, but it stung because there was truth to it. Back in the 2000s and 2010s, installing Linux felt like an adventure. Sometimes a fun one, sometimes a nightmare. You'd boot into a live USB, cross your fingers, and hope your trackpad worked. If it didn't, you were Googling forum threads from 2009. Graphics drivers. Pick the wrong one, and your screen went black. Audio might work, might not. Sleep mode, flip a coin. Linux was freedom. But it wasn't frictionless. Fast forward to today, 2026, and the story feels completely different. You install a modern Linux distro now, and it feels less like a hobbyist project and more like a finished product. The installer is clean, fast, and idiot-proof. You click Next, 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 and you're done in 5 minutes. Secure boot works out of the box. Disk encryption is a checkbox. No cryptic partitioning required, unless you want it. And here's the wild part. Most people never open the terminal at all. Think about that. For years, the terminal was the symbol of Linux. Powerful, yes, but also intimidating. Now, for everyday tasks, you just don't need it. Drivers install automatically. Software updates happen in the background. App stores are real, modern, and full of actual software people want. Grandma could use this. And that's not an insult anymore. That's a compliment. Then there's the desktop itself. If you haven't tried Linux recently, you probably still imagine something from 10 years ago. Maybe blocky themes, inconsistent icons, apps that look like they're from 3 different operating systems stitched together. That's gone. Wayland finally matured. Not almost ready, not experimental, not try at your own risk. It's just the default. And it's smooth. Animations are buttery. Touchpads feel precise. High refresh rate monitors actually matter now. Drag a window, and it sticks to your cursor like it's physically attached. Fractional scaling works. Mixed DPI monitors. Works HDR. Works variable refresh rate. Works. It's almost funny how boring these features are now, because they just work. But if you remember the old days, you know how huge that is. GNOME, KDE, and other desktops stopped fighting about basics and started polishing details. The difference shows everywhere. Consistent design language, thoughtful animations, settings that make sense, dark mode that doesn't randomly break half your apps. Everything feels intentional. Open the system settings in 2026. Linux, and it doesn't look like a control panel from 2004. It looks like something Apple or Microsoft would ship. Sometimes even better. And then, there's performance. Linux always had a reputation for being lightweight, but now it's lightweight and slick. Even cheap laptops feel fast. Old hardware gets a second life. Fans spin less, battery lasts longer. Laptops that struggled on Windows suddenly feel new again. That's not magic. That's efficiency. The kernel got smarter about power management. Desktop environments optimized animations. Apps use modern toolkits. Flatpak and containerization improve dependency. Hell. Everything stacks together to create a system that just feels responsive. Click something and it opens. Immediately. No loading spinner. No not responding, just go. Says. And gaming, oh man, gaming. If you told a Linux user in 2012 that Linux would become one of the best gaming platforms by 2026, they would have laughed at you. Back then, gaming on Linux meant maybe a few indie titles and a lot of disappointment. You'd check compatibility lists, mess with Wine, tweak configs for hours, and still get 20 FPS now. You install Steam, log in, and most of your library just runs. Proton changed everything. It stopped being a hack and started being infrastructure. Thousands of Windows games run out of the box, AAA titles, Day 1 releases, anti-cheat, finally working, multiplayer actually functional. You click install, you play, that's it. No guides, no tricks. The Steam Deck played a massive role here too. Valve didn't just make a handheld. They accidentally forced the entire industry to take Linux seriously. Developers had to test, anti-IT vendors had to adapt, GPU drivers had to improve. Suddenly Linux wasn't a rounding error anymore. It was millions of devices in people's hands, and that momentum carried over to the desktop. Today, it's completely normal to see gamers running Linux full-time. Some even prefer it. Lower overhead, better performance in certain titles. No forced updates in the middle of a match. No telemetry nonsense. No ads in the start menu. Just your games. But it's not just gamers who benefited. Creators did too. For years, creative professionals were stuck. Linux is great, but I need Photoshop. I need Premiere. I need my tools. In 2026, that wall started to crack. First, open-source tools grew up. Blender became industry standard. Krita got insanely powerful. GIMP modernized its workflow. DaVinci Resolve runs beautifully. Audacity evolved. OBS dominates streaming. These aren't Linux alternatives anymore. They're just good software. Then something unexpected happened. More companies started shipping native Linux versions. Why? Because it stopped being scary. Containerized packaging, predictable environments, and a growing user base made it worth it. And for everything else, compatibility layers got so good, you barely notice them. Sometimes you're running a Windows app, and you forget. It feels native. That line between platforms is fading. And let's talk about hardware support, because this used to be Linux's Achilles heel. In the past, buying a laptop for Linux meant researching obscure compatibility lists. You'd pray your Wi-Fi chip wasn't cursed. Fingerprint reader, probably useless. Webcam maybe. Now major vendors ship laptops with Linux pre-installed. Dell, Lenovo, Framework, System 76, and more. Not experimental. Not community supported, official. Drivers are upstream. Firmware updates are handled through the system updater. You don't go to random websites anymore. Plug in a printer. It works. Bluetooth headphones works. Game controller works. 4K monitor works. It sounds small. But this is the difference between enthusiast OS and mainstream OS. Then there's privacy. This might be the quiet killer feature. In a world where every big tech company is stuffing AI assistants, adds telemetry, and suggested content into your operating system, Linux feels refreshingly calm. No pop-ups trying to sell you cloud storage. No forced accounts. No mysterious background processes sending data somewhere. It's your computer again. You decide what runs. You decide what updates. You decide what gets installed. For a lot of people, that alone is reason enough to switch, especially professionals. Developers, sysadmins, cybersecurity folks, researchers. For them, Linux isn't just comfortable. It's home. And here's the thing. The tools they use every day are built for Linux. First Docker, Kubernetes, Git, Python, Rust, Node. The entire cloud ecosystem. Everything feels native. On other systems, you're adapting. On Linux, you're in the default environment. And with modern desktops, you no longer feel like you're sacrificing usability for power. You get both. That's the big shift. Old Linux asked you to compromise. You want freedom, okay, but you'll have to tinker. New Linux says, here's freedom. And it's polished. So, did we win? Well, that depends on what winning means. If winning means 90% market share, replacing Windows everywhere, dominating every office and school, probably not. Not yet. But maybe that was never the right goal. Because look around. Millions of Steam Decks. Chromebooks running Linux under the hood. Developers using Linux daily. Creators adopting open-source tools. Privacy-conscious users fleeing ad-stuffed operating systems. Major companies shipping Linux hardware. Linux isn't invisible anymore. It's everywhere. It quietly became the backbone of everything. Servers, cloud, phones, embedded devices, supercomputers. And now finally, desktops that don't feel like a compromise. Maybe winning isn't about replacing everyone else. Maybe it's about becoming good enough that choosing Linux feels normal. And that's exactly where we are in 2026. You don't install Linux to make a statement. You don't install it to be edgy. You install it because it's just good. That's the biggest change of all. Linux didn't suddenly beat everyone with flashy marketing or billion-dollar campaigns. It just slowly, stubbornly, relentlessly improved, year after year, patch after patch, release after release, until one day you look Explain and think, wait, when did it get this good? And that's how you know something has truly matured. So if you haven't tried Linux in a while, maybe it's time. Grab a USB, install it on an old laptop, spend a weekend with it. You might be shocked. Because the Linux desktop of 2026 isn't the one you remember. It's faster, cleaner, friendlier, more powerful, more private, more polished. It's almost unrecognizable. And for the first time ever, it doesn't feel like we're waiting for the year of the Linux desktop. It feels like we're already living in it.